So I studied abroad back in college, both in undergrad and graduate school, and I thought since I'm traveling so far across the pond, I might as well stick around for a couple of weeks after the classes end. And the majority of that time was usually spent in London because I just absolutely love London. But anyway, I think it was the first time when I was in undergrad, I was hanging out in London for a couple of weeks when classes ended. And this one particular rainy day, I was hanging out in this pub in the middle of the afternoon with a writing journal and a pint. I had just started fancying myself a writer. I hadn't written anything by that point, but I was in London sitting in a pub, having a pint in the middle of the afternoon with my writing journal, feeling all cool. It's so much easier to feel cool whenever you're abroad when you travel alone. So anyway, I was nearing the end of my pint, the scribbles in my journal were drying up, and the rain had stopped finally, and the sun had come out. So I thought, well, I'll head back to where I'm staying, take a nap before round two. So I finished my pint, gathered my crap, and headed in the direction of where I was staying. And the streets weren't very active at this point of the day, I think because it had been raining, and there was only one other person on the sidewalk that I was on the street that I was on, and he was heading in my direction. And I thought, well, wow, that's a very tall man. But as we neared each other, because we were going in two different directions, my mind clicked on and I suddenly realized who it was. It was none other than Stephen Fry. I realize some of you will not know who Stephen Fry is, but again, having fancied myself as a writer, even though I'd never written anything, that was Stephen Fry. And of course, after a couple of pints, I was completely starstruck, but I did my best to hold it inside and said nothing. We passed each other, but my mouth opened up and all of a sudden I screamed, "Oh my God." I didn't scream it, but I probably said it that loud, "Oh my God," and just kept walking. But for some reason, a few steps further, I stopped in my tracks, turned around, and he had rounded a corner. So naturally, I did an about face and started following him. I had absolutely no idea how long I was gonna follow him or what I would do if I ran into him somewhere down the line, but I did. I was in London, I had had a couple of drinks, and it was Stephen Fry. Now, the streets are narrow in this part of London, and there are a lot of twists and turns in the area that I was in. And after 6 or 7 blocks, I'm gonna say that he probably took about 2 or 3 turns. And around block 8 or 9, he ducked in this little corner store. So naturally, now having caught up with him, I ducked into the same store, went straight to the counter to get some gum while he looked at some magazines or newspapers or something like that. And because I checked out first, I had to exit and act like I was fumbling with my gum wrapper until he exited. At which point I grabbed the first thing that I could grab, and instead of grabbing the cool writing journal that I was just using, I think I pulled out the Gay's Guide to London. And I said, "Mr. Fry, is there any way that you could sign this? This Gay's Guide to London?" He was very gracious. He signed the front cover. He patted me on the shoulder, and he said, "Only because you've been following me for 10 blocks. So doing what I do in every nervous situation, I opened my mouth and said, "I would have followed you a lot longer, but I didn't want you to be frightened. And I need a nap." He tipped his hat, threw a scarf around his neck, and then headed in his direction that he was always heading in, and I went back to my flat. Over on Blue Sky, somebody had suggested listening to some Stephen Fry recording